Before you heal your relationships, before you find your purpose, before you feel whole, you have to face her. Not just your mother as a person, but your mother as a pattern, your mother as a mirror. Carl Jung believed that the mother complex is one of the most powerful forces shaping your unconscious life. Not because mothers are inherently good or bad, but because the relationship between mother and child is your first blueprint for love, safety, and self-worth. It's the first story your nervous system records. And for most of us, it's the one we spend the rest of our lives unconsciously reenacting. Maybe she was loving but anxious. Maybe she was cold, distant, controlling. Maybe she gave everything, but somehow you still felt invisible. Or maybe you have no idea what you feel about her, because you've spent your whole life trying not to. But here's what Jung saw clearly. Until you face the truth of how your mother shaped you, you will project her into everything. You'll date her. You'll rebel against her. You'll overcompensate to avoid becoming her. And every time you feel rejected, unseen, or too much, it's not just the moment that hurts. It's the echo of that original wound. And that echo is loud. It's the reason you feel responsible for everyone's feelings. It's the reason you collapse when someone's upset with you. It's the reason you struggle to feel safe in your own body or to trust your own voice. Because before you knew language, you learned this. Love requires that I stay small, stay good, stay whatever she needs me to be. That early adaptation becomes your default wiring. You don't question it, because it's all you've ever known. You just keep trying to be good enough to earn love, good enough not to be abandoned, good enough to avoid the look in her eyes that made you feel like too much. But the truth is, you were never too much. You were just too awake in a house that didn't know how to hold your light. And now, you're waking up again. Only this time, you get to do it with awareness. You get to name what hurt. You get to stop gaslighting your younger self. You get to stop performing safety and start becoming it. That's where healing begins, not in fixing your mother, but in freeing yourself from the invisible contract you signed as her child, the one that said, "I'll carry your pain so you'll keep loving me." The hidden ways the mother wound shapes your relationships, self-worth, and emotional life. You think you're choosing your partners, your friends, your career, but much of the time, you're choosing based on what your nervous system believes is safe. And for many of us, safe means familiar. And familiar, if you haven't faced your mother wound, often means unavailable, unpredictable, or conditional. This is why you chase people who keep their distance. This is why you feel addicted to proving yourself. This is why love doesn't feel real unless it's a little bit painful. Because deep down, that pain matches the first story you were told about love. The mother wound is not always about what she did. It's about what you learned in response to her energy, her moods, her words, or her silence. If she praised you only when you were quiet, helpful, high-achieving, you learned that love is transactional. If she blamed you for her unhappiness, you learned that love means self-abandonment. If she depended on you emotionally, you learned to parent your parent. And now, you attract people you can rescue. You think you're broken. You think you have attachment issues. But what you really have is loyalty to your original wound. And Jung would say that loyalty runs deep. It lives in your shadow, in the parts of you that still believe love requires suffering. It's why you sabotage calm relationships. It's why you feel guilty when you set a boundary. It's why part of you still hopes she'll change or finally see you. But here's the truth. Healing doesn't come from waiting for her to become someone else. Healing comes from you becoming the one who no longer needs her to. And that doesn't mean cutting her off. It means cutting the cord that says your worth is her responsibility. Because it's not. She may have been your first mirror, but she is not your final reflection. You get to update the story. You get to rewire the script. But only if you stop avoiding the wound. Only if you stop bypassing it with forgiveness before you've grieved. Only if you're brave enough to feel the sadness that says, "I needed more than you were able to give. And now, I'm learning how to give it to myself, the child that still lives in you, and why it's time to bring them home." There's a child inside you, and they've been waiting for someone to finally say, "I see you, I hear you, I know it wasn't fair." and it wasn't your fault. They've been waiting in the background of your relationships, showing up in every argument, every panic, every time someone's tone feels just a little too familiar. That child is not weak. That child is wounded. They are the version of you who tried to make sense of a world that didn't make room for their emotions, their truth, their needs. And you've been trying to parent them with perfection, by becoming hyper-responsible, by trying not to make any mistakes, by shrinking yourself in rooms that remind you of her. But here's what Carl Jung taught. You can't heal the inner child by controlling the outer world. You heal them by meeting them, by turning toward the pain with presence instead of performance. That starts by telling the truth. I'm still hurting. I'm still reacting. I'm still afraid that if I speak up, I'll be abandoned again. This isn't weakness. This is integration. This is what Jung called individuation, becoming whole by facing what you once had to hide. And if you've made it this far, then you're ready to face what your younger self thought would break you. Ready to say, I'm not waiting for her to apologize. I'm giving myself the life she couldn't give me. And if this content is making sense to you, then click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Because healing this wound doesn't mean replacing your mother. It means reclaiming your power from the version of you that was still waiting to be chosen. And in that reclamation, you become someone new. Someone who doesn't chase love. Someone who doesn't collapse when they're misunderstood. Someone who knows how to reparent the pain instead of projecting it. You don't heal by forgetting what happened. You heal by remembering it with clarity, with presence, and with enough safety to finally feel it through. That's what you're doing now. And that's how you become the adult your inner child has always needed. The patterns you inherited, and how to finally end them. You weren't just raised by your mother. You were shaped by her unmet needs, by her silence, her fear, her sacrifices, her shame, her stories she never said out loud, but lived through you anyway. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in one generation is lived out by the next. You didn't just inherit her smile or her skin tone. You inherited the grief she never expressed, the rage she swallowed, the voice she was taught to mute, and most of all, the patterns she never had the tools to break. This is why you apologize too much, why you shrink when you're proud, why you feel guilty for needing space, why you stay in relationships long after your spirit has left, because leaving feels like betrayal. You weren't just taught how to behave, you were taught how to survive her love, and whatever strategies helped you survive then are probably hurting you now. But here's what Jung's shadow work showed us. You are not doomed to repeat what you don't repair. You are not sentenced to carry what she couldn't put down. You are allowed to be the interruption, the breaking point, the healing voice that says, this ends with me. But let's be honest, breaking generational patterns doesn't feel like a spiritual glow-up. It feels like grief, like loneliness, like waking up in a world where none of the old rules make sense anymore, and you haven't yet written the new ones. That's because you're between identities, the one your mother taught you to be, and the one you're finally becoming. You're shedding decades of unconscious loyalty. You're facing emotions she didn't have language for. You're creating space for a kind of safety that didn't exist when you were growing up. That is sacred work. And it will feel lonely at first, because no one will celebrate what they don't understand. But your nervous system will. Your inner child will. Your future relationships will. And your legacy will. Because every time you choose not to repeat the cycle, you create the possibility of a life where love doesn't have to hurt, the illusion of the good daughter or good son, and how it keeps you trapped. Somewhere along the line, you decided who you had to be in order to be loved. Maybe it wasn't said out loud, maybe it wasn't written anywhere, but you knew. You felt it. You had to be agreeable, quiet, smart, easy to handle, not too loud, not too sensitive. You became what Carl Jung would call a persona, a mask designed to survive the emotional climate of your childhood. This mask becomes what many people call being a good daughter or a good son. But what it really means is, I've learned to suppress my truth so you'll stay close. I've learned to trade authenticity for attachment. I've learned that love is earned through self-erasure. And maybe it worked. Maybe you got the closeness, the validation, the peace. But here's the cost. Now, you don't know who you are without the role. You don't know how to say no without guilt. You don't know how to show up without fixing, pleasing, or managing everyone else's emotions. The illusion of the good child isn't just exhausting. It's invisible. You wear it so well, most people never know you're performing. Not even you. Until one day, you start to resent the praise. You start to feel hollow in relationships where you're always the giver. You start to hear a voice inside that says, "I'm tired of being who they want. What about me?" That voice is not selfish, it's sacred. It's the beginning of individuation. The psychological process Jung said is necessary to become whole. And wholeness means this: you're no longer trying to be good. You're trying to be true. That doesn't mean you stop loving your mother. It means you stop loving her in ways that require you to betray yourself. It means you start telling the truth about what it felt like. You start honoring the child in you who gave too much. You start recognizing that the most rebellious thing you can do is show up real. No more shrinking, no more self-abandoning, no more wearing peace like a costume while your soul screams for air. The good child helped you survive. But the whole adult? That's who will set you free, facing the guilt, reclaiming the voice, what it takes to heal without hurting yourself. One of the final barriers to healing the mother wound is guilt. Not because you did something wrong, but because you're finally doing something different. You're telling the truth. You're setting boundaries. You're not answering every call. You're saying no without explaining. And deep down, the old conditioning flares up. Am I being selfish? Am I being cruel? This is the voice of the child who thought, if I cause her pain, she won't love me. If I disappoint her, I'm unsafe. If I speak my truth, I'll lose her. But here's the truth Jung pointed toward. Real healing requires confrontation, not aggression, not blame, but clarity. And clarity often threatens the system you were raised in. Because when you stop performing, when you stop emotionally caretaking your mother, when you stop cushioning her from the truth of how her behavior shaped you, you change the rules of the relationship. And systems don't like change. So yes, guilt will rise. So will self-doubt. So will grief. Because you're not just breaking a pattern, you're breaking an identity. The identity of the one who kept the peace at all costs. The one who swallowed her voice to preserve the illusion of closeness. The one who confused love with emotional labor. But here's the shift. You are not hurting her. You are healing you. And the two are not the same. You can love her and still say no. You can honor her story and still rewrite yours. You can feel compassion and still choose distance. This is what Jung meant when he said the unconscious must become conscious, or it will rule your life and you will call it fate. When you act out of guilt, you stay inside the fate. When you act out of truth, you change it. So let the guilt come. Let it pass through you like a wave. And when it's gone, what remains is someone who finally gave themselves permission to speak, to rest, to stop performing. And from that place, your voice returns, your energy returns, you return. When you finally see her clearly and no longer need her to change. The final step isn't fixing her, it's seeing her clearly, without fantasy, without resentment, without the ache that says, "Why couldn't you just love me better?" Carl Jung believed that true freedom begins when we stop asking others to complete the stories they broke. You stop trying to convince her. Stop waiting for her to take accountability. Stop needing her to understand everything you've had to undo. Because now you understand. You see her as she is, a woman shaped by her own trauma, a daughter who became a mother without healing her inner child, a person who gave what she had, even if it was laced with pain. That doesn't excuse everything. It doesn't erase the impact, but it releases the contract. Because when you finally stop needing her to become someone else, you become someone else. You become the adult who no longer needs a perfect parent to feel safe. You become the inner parent your younger self was waiting for. You become someone who can hold grief and grace in the same hand. That's when it all softens, the tension in your body, the urge to prove your worth, the obsession with being enough. It dissolves because you've stopped outsourcing your wholeness. You've stopped rehearsing the same scene, hoping for a different ending. You've stepped off the stage and into your life. You don't need to reject her. You don't need to adore her. You just need to see her fully and then choose you, not from spite, from sovereignty. Because once you stop asking your mother to give you what she couldn't, you become free to give it to yourself. And that's the moment the cycle ends. The life that begins after the mother wound and the peace you were always meant to have. There's a life that begins only after the mother wound ends. Not when the pain disappears, but when it no longer defines you. When your worth is no longer measured by how much you can carry. When your voice no longer trembles every time you say no. When your nervous system finally learns what it means to rest. Carl Jung said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of the self, but by integration, by bringing the hidden, wounded, and repressed into the light. That's what you've done, not all at once, not perfectly, but bravely. You faced what most people avoid their whole lives. You sat with the pain without turning it into poison. You let the story rise, not to relive it, but to release it. And now, you get to begin again, not as a reaction, not as a role, but as someone real. You start trusting people who don't trigger your survival instinct. You start letting in calm, steady, boring peace, and realizing it's beautiful. You stop chasing intensity and start choosing safety. You stop confusing love with work, and you stop making room for people who only love the version of you that overgives. This is the soft revolution. This is the self that emerges when you no longer need to protect the child who had to perform to survive. And as you live from that self, the whole one, the honest one, the one who knows their pain and still chooses love, your entire world begins to shift. You speak more slowly. You choose more wisely. You rest more deeply. You live from peace, not from proving. And it's not because she changed. It's because you did. You finally faced it. You finally stopped running. You finally came home. If you made it this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering, returning, reclaiming your inner ground. So trust that the video YouTube shows you next, the one appearing now, is not random. It's the next doorway, the next layer, and it will meet you exactly where you are. If this resonated, take a moment to subscribe. Drop a comment below, not for the algorithm, but to mark this chapter in your journey. We'll see you in the next depth. Depthoria continues.